Josh Baskin is playing a video game when his mother calls him to take out the trash. Because of the distraction, he loses the game. After taking out the trash, he gets on his bicycle and goes to meet his friend Billy. While they are hanging out, their classmate Cynthia appears. When he sees her, Josh gets nervous and his heart beats faster when she calls him by his name. Noticing the chemistry between them, Billy promises to find out if Cynthia is also interested in Josh. Both return home singing happily. That night, Josh's father sets up a crib in his room, since they want him to share the bedroom with Rachel, his little sister. Meanwhile, Billy's mother complains that she does everything around the house while he serves dinner and sighs at her monologue. Later, the friends talk over the walkie-talkie, and Billy insists that Josh has a chance with Cynthia. Days later, Josh goes to the fair with his parents and sees Cynthia standing in line for a ride. Wanting to impress her, he decides to get on the attraction, but when he talks with her, a boy named Derek appears and he discovers that Cynthia is on a date with him. When he tries to get on the ride, the operator stops him because he is too short. Disappointed, he walks away alone until he finds a wish machine called Zolter. He inserts a quarter, but nothing happens, so he hits it. Suddenly, the machine turns on and asks him to make a wish. Josh wishes to be big, and a card comes out saying that his wish was granted. When he looks down, he notices that the machine is not plugged in. Frightened, he leaves quickly. The next morning, after a storm, Mrs. Baskin calls him to go to school. Half asleep, he goes to the bathroom, but when he looks in the mirror, he sees an adult man. He panics when he realizes that his wish has come true. Not knowing what to do, he takes his father's clothes and runs away before his mother sees him. He runs to look for the machine, but when he arrives, the fair has already disappeared, leaving only trash. He returns home and tries to explain to his mother what happened, but she does not believe him and throws him out of the house, thinking he is an intruder. Meanwhile, Billy has a bad day in physical education and stays behind putting the balls away in the storage room. Suddenly, Josh appears and explains what happened, but his friend gets scared and screams for help. Josh sings his favorite song to prove who he really is, and Billy finally recognizes him. At home, Josh's parents are desperate over his disappearance and report the case to the police. When the neighbors gather in front of the house, Billy discreetly brings a bag of clothes and gives it to Josh, who is hiding. He advises him to find the machine and reverse the wish. Josh is afraid of getting into trouble, but Billy assures him that his parents will be happy when they see him again as a child. Together, they take a bus to New York believing that the fair may have moved there. Upon arriving, they walk through the streets and check into a hotel, although Billy has to return home and promises to come back the next day. That night, Josh hears gunshots and screams, frightened, and ends up crying alone. The next day, both go through video game stores and arcades looking for the Zolter machine, without success. They even go to the license office to ask for a list of fairs and parks, but they are told it will take more than a month. Josh despairs at the idea of being an adult for so long, but Billy encourages him to look for a job until he can reverse the wish. While they eat ice cream, Billy checks newspaper ads, and Josh decides to apply as a computer operator at the MacMillan Toy Company. There he fills out an application, and the personnel director misunderstands his experience and education, believing he is more qualified than he really is. At that moment, Susan Lawrence, an executive, enters complaining about an employee and demands that they hire a replacement. Because of this, the director hires Josh immediately. The next day, Susan arrives at the office and sees her coworkers unpacking gifts for a future bride, which irritates her because no one is working. She locks herself in her office and tests a Princess Gwendolyn doll to check its voice. Meanwhile, Josh starts his first day, but a coworker advises him to work more slowly or the others might be fired. On the other hand, Susan meets with Paul Davenport, her coworker and boyfriend, to talk about the drop in sales. She reminds him that the idea for the product line was hers, but Paul tells her to discuss it with the owner of the company, Mr. MacMillan. Susan insists that it is not her fault, and he promises to take care of the matter. At his desk, Josh tries to call his mother to assure her that her son is fine, but she thinks he is a kidnapper. Even so, he manages to tell her that he is safe. Later, Susan and Paul present the sales report, and Josh accidentally bumps into him while running with some documents. The The boss, amused, praises him for his enthusiasm. Soon, Josh receives his first paycheck and, excited, treats himself with Billy. Even so, he misses his family and calls his mother again, pretending to do a survey just to hear her voice. The next day, he enters a toy store and marvels at everything, remembering his childhood. There he meets MacMillan again, who watches how Josh interacts with the children and is fascinated by his knowledge of toys and his genuine enthusiasm. Both end up playing together on a huge floor piano, performing Heart and Soul and Chopsticks. MacMillan has so much fun that he decides to give Josh a dream job, testing toys for the company. However, Paul becomes furious when he discovers that Josh was promoted so quickly and cannot believe that MacMillan has named him Vice President of Product Development. Later, Josh shows Billy his new office, and his friend congratulates him on his luck. Susan and Paul begin to suspect him, since there are no records of his experience at any toy company, without realizing that his photo as a child appears on milk cartons. During a presentation, Paul tries to explain his project while Josh tests a toy, distracting everyone. But the boss watches Josh with sympathy. When Paul finishes, Josh asks why the toy transforms from a building into a robot and points out that it does not seem fun, suggesting improvements. Everyone agrees with him, which enrages Paul, who begins to see him as a threat. Soon after, Josh and Billy move into a spacious apartment where they spend their days playing and buying video games. Days later, the company organizes a party, and Billy helps his friend choose a new suit. At the event, Susan tries to talk to MacMillan about a new product line, but he reminds her that they are at a party. Josh appears wearing a white suit full of flashy details. His coworkers make fun of him, although Susan cannot stop looking at him, impressed, just like the boss. During the night, Josh tries all the food, and his childish behavior draws attention. Tired of Paul's dry humor, Susan approaches Josh, but he eats something unpleasant and asks for a milkshake. She offers to take him in her limousine. While they ride, Susan tries to talk about work relationships, but Josh entertains himself by playing with the buttons in the car. Then he opens the sunroof and invites Susan to lean out. She agrees and enjoys the moment. As they pass by his apartment, Josh comments that they live nearby, and Susan asks to go up to see it. When they arrive, Susan hints at staying the night, but Josh misunderstands and thinks about a sleepover. She marvels at his apartment full of games and a trampoline. Josh invites her to jump with him, and although she hesitates at first, she ends up having fun. Then they play board games. Before going to sleep, Susan prepares for something more intimate, but Josh simply climbs into the top bunk and gives her a ring with a compass that glows in the dark, telling her it will help her not get lost. Susan smiles tenderly. The next morning, Paul asks about Susan's sudden disappearance, but she assures him that she only took Josh to his house. When changing the radio station, Susan bothers him unintentionally, reminding Josh. Later, Paul invites Josh to play tennis against the wall. Being competitive, Paul cheats and Josh calls him out, but he denies it, which leads to a fight. Josh ends up with a bloody nose, and Susan takes care of him, advising him not to get into fights with Paul again. He asks her why she is so kind, and she replies that he is one of the kindest people she has ever known, which makes Susan smile and leads her to give him a kiss on the cheek. That night, Josh visits MacMillan's office and notices that the boss is stressed. MacMillan complains about his plan to expand the market to children over 12 years old, explaining that a 13-year-old only wants things for his age, which catches Josh's attention. One day, Susan returns Paul's belongings to break up with him and wonders if she is now interested in Josh because of his position in the company. Susan clarifies that she is only interested because he is an adult. The next day, Josh celebrates his birthday with Billy, who surprises him with a cake. Josh makes a happy wish and then they go together to the fair with Susan. They have fun like children and win prizes. When they hear the orchestra, Susan invites Josh to dance jazz, and while they dance, she feels safe and vulnerable. They begin to kiss, but Josh stops to tell her something important. Finally, they decide to go to Susan's apartment. There, Susan undresses and turns off the lights, but Josh turns them on to see everything in detail. The next day, he goes to work with a big smile, more confident as an adult, and asks his secretary for black coffee. Susan, meanwhile, is kinder to her coworkers and gives them a basket of gifts. Days later, they have dinner with Susan's friends. A boy named Adam asks his father for help with algebra, but his father is busy, and Josh steps in to help him, impressing Susan and her friend with his skill and patience. Meanwhile, Billy finally finds the location of the Zolter machine, which is at Sea Point Park, and runs to give the address to Josh. Although he decides to go to his meeting first, Billy leaves him with the information. Josh tries to present his electronic comic book proposal at the company, but the board does not understand his idea. Susan saves him by explaining how children can decide the comic's story. Even so, Josh feels discouraged and excuses himself. Realizing that adult life is not for him, Josh takes a taxi to Sea Point Park. Billy sees him and encourages him, and Susan, who hears this, introduces herself as his girlfriend. Josh finally finds the machine, inserts his coin, and when it does not work, unplugs it. Then he manages to wish to be a child again. Susan confirms that he is not lying, which saddens her, understanding that their relationship is over. Josh suggests using the machine to become younger, but she refuses. Susan takes Josh to his house, and before leaving, kisses him on the forehead. As she leaves, he has already returned to being a 13-year-old boy. Josh runs home and finally reunites with his family, resuming his adventures and happy moments with Billy as in the old days.